4 days. That is all it took. 4 days into the biggest World Cup ever created, the tournament that was supposed to redefine football history was already facing questions nobody wanted to ask. Not about tactics, not about star players, not about who might lift the trophy. Questions about whether the tournament itself was becoming too big for its own infrastructure. Because on paper, the 2026 World Cup looks unstoppable. 48 national teams, 16 stadiums, 3 host countries, 104 matches. A tournament stretching from June 11th to July 19th across North America, designed to break every attendance record, every broadcasting record, and every commercial record FIFA has ever seen. That is the promise. But the reality emerging during the opening days looked very different, and the deeper you look, the more uncomfortable the story becomes. Officially, the tournament belongs to the United States, Canada, and Mexico. A historic partnership, a continental celebration, a symbol of football's global growth. But there is one detail hidden inside the numbers. 78 of the tournament's 104 matches are being played in the United States. Not Canada, not Mexico, the United States. Which means the success or failure of this World Cup is ultimately tied to what happens there. The branding may say 3 nations. The responsibility falls overwhelmingly on one. And almost immediately, a strange contrast started appearing. In Mexico City, the opening atmosphere looked exactly like what FIFA had promised. Packed stands, constant singing, generations of football history surrounding every moment. The famous Estadio Azteca once again became the center of the football world. This is the same stadium that witnessed Pele's triumph in 1970. The same stadium that witnessed Diego Maradona's goal of the century in 1986. The first stadium in history to host 3 different World Cups. The images coming from Mexico felt authentic, organic, natural, like football itself was carrying the event forward. Then viewers switched to some of the American venues, and suddenly the atmosphere changed. The conversation changed. The questions changed. Instead of football, people were talking about logistics, transportation, weather, attendance, the kind of discussions no organizer ever wants dominating a World Cup. Because the first major concern wasn't even football related, it was the climate, and the numbers behind that concern are difficult to ignore. Several early group stage matches were identified as carrying an extremely high probability of performance impairing heat conditions. Not uncomfortable conditions, not warm conditions. Conditions that could directly affect elite athletes competing at the highest level. South Korea against Czechia in Guadalajara. Netherlands against Japan in Dallas. Germany against Curacao in Houston. Saudi Arabia against Uruguay in Miami. And that list only represented the beginning. As projections extended deeper into the tournament, additional fixtures appeared vulnerable. England, Croatia, Portugal, DR Congo. The concern wasn't limited to one city. It was spreading across the tournament map, and that's when a larger issue emerged. Out of the 16 selected World Cup venues, only a small number offer the kind of fully climate-controlled environments that completely eliminate extreme summer weather. The majority do not, which means one of the biggest sporting events in human history is now battling something nobody can negotiate with: the weather. And unlike many tournament controversies, this one comes with historical context. Temperatures during North American summers are not what they were decades ago. Conditions today are significantly different from those experienced during previous World Cups. The environment itself has changed, which raises an uncomfortable question. If organizers knew exactly what North American summers looked like, why are these concerns only becoming central now? But the weather story doesn't stop with heat, because another problem arrived almost immediately: storms. During one Group E match in Philadelphia, severe weather forced fan areas to shut down. Evacuations followed. Activities stopped. Large gatherings suddenly became vulnerable to conditions outside anyone's control. And here's where things become harder to dismiss, because this wasn't unprecedented. The previous year's expanded Club World Cup in the United States had already provided a warning. Multiple matches experienced significant weather disruptions. One contest reportedly stretched to nearly 5 hours because of repeated lightning delays. 5 hours for a football match. At the time, some coaches publicly questioned whether summer scheduling in certain regions was creating unnecessary risks. Those concerns existed before the World Cup began. Now they were returning on an even larger stage. And if climate was creating pressure outside the stadiums, stadiums, transportation was creating pressure around them. Los Angeles became one of the clearest examples. Sophie Stadium was expected to showcase the future of major event hosting: modern, efficient, world-class. Instead, many supporters found themselves trapped inside a completely different experience. Traffic congestion, long security lines, extended waits, hours spent moving through infrastructure bottlenecks. Some fans had traveled across continents, across oceans, only to spend enormous portions of their match day navigating transportation challenges under intense summer temperatures. FIFA attempted adjustments. Kickoff schedules shifted. Hydration breaks became standard. Operational changes appeared. But critics pointed out a simple reality: a 3-minute hydration break helps players on the field. It does not help supporters spending hours outside stadium gates. And suddenly, the discussion wasn't just about football. It was about whether the tournament's physical footprint had become too large, whether expansion itself was creating new vulnerabilities. Then came the image that may end up defining the entire debate, because statistics can be argued, reports can be challenged, official statements can be interpreted differently, but television images are harder to explain away. The United States national team opened its campaign against Paraguay in Los Angeles. On the field, everything looked positive. The Americans won convincingly, 4 goals, a dominant performance, exactly the kind of result host nations dream about. Yet viewers watching around the world noticed something strange: large sections of visible empty seats. Not everywhere, but enough to be noticeable, enough to become a talking point, enough to generate headlines. And that created a contradiction nobody expected. The host nation was winning, the football was entertaining, the market was massive, the occasion was historic, so why were empty seats appearing on global broadcasts? That question became difficult to ignore, because if a host nation match struggles to create a completely full visual spectacle, what happens during neutral fixtures? What happens when lower profile nations play each other? What happens when travel demands increase? What happens if weather complications continue? What happens if fan enthusiasm starts competing with practical obstacles? Those questions don't automatically mean disaster, but they do reveal uncertainty, and uncertainty is dangerous for an event built on confidence. To be fair, there is a counter argument, a strong one. World Cups have always faced criticism. Every World Cup, every single one. Before tournaments begin, there are always predictions of chaos. There are always concerns. There are always stories about infrastructure, transportation, costs, or planning. Then the football starts, and suddenly nobody remembers any of it. Great matches erase problems. Historic goals erase complaints. Legendary moments erase headlines. Football has an extraordinary ability to overwhelm every other narrative, and 2026 still possesses enormous potential. Brazil are chasing another title. Argentina are attempting to defend their crown. France remain one of the strongest teams in the world. England believe their moment may finally have arrived. A new generation of stars is emerging. The post-Messi era is taking shape. One unforgettable knockout round could change everything. One iconic final could rewrite the entire conversation. That possibility remains very real, but that's also why the opening days matter so much, because the tournament now appears to be moving in 2 directions at the same time. One direction leads toward football history, toward packed stadiums, memorable matches, global celebrations, and a successful expansion that changes the sport forever. The other direction leads somewhere far less comfortable, toward recurring weather disruptions, toward transportation strain, toward visible attendance questions, toward growing skepticism about whether the event has expanded beyond what its infrastructure can consistently support. And that is why Canada and Mexico suddenly occupy a fascinating position in this story, because the nations that many skeptics once viewed as secondary partners are increasingly becoming examples of what supporters expected this tournament to feel like. The atmosphere, the energy, the connection, the sense that football itself remains at the center of the event. Meanwhile, the country carrying most of the tournament's operational burden finds itself under growing scrutiny, not because the football is failing, because the surrounding systems are being tested. Every day, every match, every broadcast. The next 2 weeks may determine everything. If attendance improves, if the knockout rounds deliver unforgettable drama, and if logistical concerns fade into the background, these opening issues will be remembered as little more than growing pains. But if the empty seats remain visible, if weather interruptions continue, if transportation frustrations keep dominating conversations, then these first few days will be remembered very differently, not as isolated incidents, not as bad luck, but as the first warning signs that the largest World Cup ever created may also be the moment the tournament became too large to hide its own weaknesses.